of the week 5 of the class and everything. So welcome on board. An interesting evening. We've got some very interesting things happening in the world outside, but we're going to shut ourselves off from what's happening in the United States for a couple of hours and enjoy much more down-to-earth activities to do with legal research. So hopefully that will be a good evening for you. This evening we've got quite a bit happening. Let me just move on there. The module, this is all still part of Module 3, which is all about legislation and researching legislation. So if you remember last week, it was very much focusing on actual statutes or acts, so the structure and features of them, the different types of acts you might encounter, a lot of terminology that relates to legislation in general. Later on tonight, the focus will be on delegated or subordinate legislation. Just a few little highlights about things that you need to be aware of when you might be doing some research relating to that. In the meantime, we want to try and consolidate your understanding of researching legislation. So we're very grateful to Larissa. You met Larissa in week 1. In the panel, but she's returning tonight, and as you know, Larissa is with the New South Wales Law Courts Library, and she's going to do some very focused legislation research activity with you, so a bit of a workshop to help you consolidate your knowledge and understanding. So make sure that as Larissa is working through things, you do make notes of things. She said that, I don't quite understand, anything that you do want clarification on. You can pop it into the chat stream, and at the right point we can ask Larissa to attend to any queries that you do have. So try to make it as interactive as you can based on what you feel you need to understand a little bit better. We gave you some exercises on Blackboard last week, and Sharon's going to do a short workshop taking just one of those questions and taking that through with you again. So building even more on what Larissa is going to be doing with you as well. And then finally, we'll have a short introduction to some of the delegated legislation aspects in Commonwealth and state situations. So hopefully you're prepared for that, and that you're prepared to work through all of this with us as we go. So Larissa's bio is on the Blackboard site, but as I say, we did meet her earlier in the course, and so I'm going to hand over at this point to Larissa to guide you through some legislation from the perspective of legal research. So if Larissa's got the microphone and take that over. Okay, you feeling comfortable?
Yeah, all good.
Great. Okay, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, as Jill said, I'm really hoping to help to consolidate the knowledge that you've been learning so far in this course. So I thought I'd take the approach of sort of working through a scenario. So what we're going to do is find the current version of the Evidence Act, make sure it really is up to date, then look at the history of a particular section, which is section 98 of that Act. And then I'm just going to show you a few of the features of the government websites along the way. And after that, I'll show you the commercial databases and some of the other non-government websites, so you can see why you use a particular resource with a particular research task. We're going to start with the Federal Register of Legislation. This is the authorised website for Commonwealth legislation. So if you're needing something for court, you really have to end up getting the text of legislation from here. So that's why I think this example is primarily focused on this website. One thing that's really important to know is that the whole site is really optimised for finding current legislation. So the big blue boxes on the home page, they're acts in force, legislative instruments in force, mobile instruments in force. If you use the search at the top, it only finds current legislation or other things if you have the very long and peculiar looking ID number. If you want to do any other kind of research, you either need to do an advanced search or you need to browse. So we'll go through all of those options. I've just had to do lots and lots of slides because apparently the interactive feature doesn't work brilliantly at the moment. So just slide by slide. So if you click on search, a little search box pops up And you can see in there it says search by register ID or in-force items. So it's just to reinforce it only finds current legislation in that box unless you have the ID number. Now, we're looking for the Evidence Act 1995. It's quite tempting to just type in Evidence Act, but if you do that, you get sort of all sorts of other results as well. You get a much more precise result if you include the year in the name of the Act. Now this one, there's not hundreds of results, but with some other acts, the word is very, very common, the keywords in the title are common, and you can end up with an unmanageable list of results. So it's just much, much better to be in the habit of putting the year in the title for that search. I'm also going to show you the advanced search options, because that little search box only finds titles. You can't do a full text search that way. So if you wanted to do a much more in-depth search, like to search full text or to, find something really, really precise, you need to use the advanced search. Now, those top fields there, they're fairly common across lots of different databases. They're basically your Boolean operators in plain language, people who don't understand about Boolean. So the first one is a phrase search. The second one is a Boolean and. The third one is a Boolean or, and the last one is a Boolean not. So you can actually construct quite a good search using those different fields. But what you should really pay attention to is the default. So if you just go straight to the advanced search, it defaults to just start searching the title and the brief description. If you want to search full text, you've got to go to choose contents and then pick full text from the menu. That's the sort of thing that people expect because of Google, it to just automatically search full text, so it's really important to know that it doesn't. It also defaults to all legislation types, which you would expect, but if you want to narrow it down a bit, you can click on all legislation types, and then you get this little list of all the different options that you've got. And so you can use it to just pick a particular one. So maybe if you wanted to find a regulation, you could just pick regulations and court rules. Or if you wanted to combine things, you could search maybe bills and EMs at the same time, that kind of thing. You can do some quite tricky things there. And the last thing I wanted to point out on this screen is that the default is, again, to enforce today. So if you wanted to find historical legislation, you need to reset this default either to any time or to between particular dates. There's lots and lots of options there, so I just wanted to point out a few of the main features. And the other option for finding a piece of legislation is to browse. So for that, we'll go back to the home page. And that menu on the left-hand side, that is sort of the key. Sometimes it's easier to browse than to search. You don't always know exactly what you're looking for until you see it. Or sometimes you're guiding someone through a research process and it's easier to talk them through something where they just click on particular things and you tell them rather than typing into a field, that kind of thing. So we're just going to pretend that I've clicked on Acts, and watch how the menu changes. So now it's just related to Acts, and it gives you the option of current legislation, which is in force, repeal legislation, which is no longer in force, as made, which is the original version of legislation, and also future law compilations. Now that's pretty rare to actually have anything in there, but that will be sort of like a marked up version of what an Act will look like once an amendment's incorporated. They just do it for major pieces of legislation. It's to help people understand the effect of amendments to key pieces of legislation. So I have clicked on Acts in Force, and then I get this browse screen. Now, they're very helpfully divided up into principal acts and amending acts. Now this just makes it so much easier to browse to a particular principal act. In the past, the list would be, there could be, 5 pages of things starting with C. Could be quite long. So I would just be clicking on EV for evidence. I also just want to show you a few other options. There's also this filter by title, and every so often you get to this point and you think, oh, hang on a second, is it the Acts Interpretation Act or is it the Interpretation Act? And rather than, you could just search, but another option is to use this filter by title, and you can just type in the word interpretation in there and it will bring up all the acts that have that word in the title. And the reason I point that out particularly is because, as I said, that little search box up there only does the current enforced things. if you wanted to do this for repealed legislation, this can be an easier way of navigating to it than to do the advanced searching, clicking all the different options and you know, clicking the right point in time, that kind of thing. So it's just a quick, snappy little tool that can be really helpful at times. So I've clicked on EV for evidence, and then I get a list of the acts that start with EV that are currently in force. Now we're going to pick the Evidence Act 1995. There's just a few things to point out on this screen as well. Sorry you mentioned before, but when it's got that tick icon, it has actually been authorised, and it will say so on the PDF version. Not every single thing on this site has got that little authorised icon. There's still a massive process of checking to be done. You just don't want to say that the text is absolutely accurate if it isn't. So the Parliamentary Council will refuse to guarantee it until they've been through that manual process. A couple of weeks ago at work, we had a New South Wales Act, and when we got the PDF version, which was not authorised from the official website, it came up and the long title actually had a URL for freedom furniture in it. And it was sort of the funniest thing that we've seen in legislation ever, but it just really illustrated that you know, you have to have the authorised version. You can't take the chances with the not authorised one. Anyway, the other thing to know about here is if you're on this site, if you click on the title of the Act, you go through to the HTML version of the Act. If you click on download over here, you get taken to a PDF or Word options for downloading the Act. And if you click on View Series, there's all sorts of goodies, which we'll come to in a minute. And it's one of the least intuitive labels I've ever seen. So I'll show you what's hidden beneath there in a minute. So I've clicked on the title of the Act, so now I'm on the HTML version of the Act. There's things on this page like it tells you the compilation date, it tells you the latest amendment that's been included, and it tells you the date that the compilation was registered. And you can see there's a bit of a lag there. The compilation date May, registered June. So it's just to say that sometimes it does take a little while for amendments to be incorporated. And so you get to be aware of that. Now over here on the details section here, if you click on that, you are taken to the little box expands and it tells you which amendments have yet to be incorporated. So this is something to check just to see if there's something that you need to be looking for. Now most of the time it's because the amendment hasn't commenced yet, so you obviously wouldn't incorporate it until it's commenced. Every so often, there's a little delay, as I said, so it might have commenced, but they haven't got around to incorporating it yet. But whatever it is, you have to check it. You can't just leave it there without finding out what it is and what's happened to it. So this one is the Trade Legislation Amendment Act number 1 of 2016, and that's the ID number I was talking about before. So you can search by that, or you can just right-click on it and open up a new tab, which is what I like to do. And so this is the text of that particular amending act. I can see from here that the amendment to the Evidence Act is contained in Schedule 2. I clicked on the commencement provision here, which opened up this commencement table over on the right-hand side of the screen. And it says that Schedule 2 commenced on the 1st of May 2016. Now, I saw this and I thought, hang on a second, isn't that the date of the compilation? What's going on? This is not right somehow. It's very unusual. So I thought, well, I better check. I better see if it really has been incorporated or not. So the way to do that is to actually look at the text of the amendment and go back to the Evidence Act, look at where it was supposed to be putting in the amendment and see if it's there. So we'll just do that. So to get to the text of the amendment, I clicked on Evidence Act in that table of contents, and it brought up the body of the bit of the Act that actually does that amendment. So here it is. It's Section 13 of that amending Act, and what it does is it inserts 2 words, major amendment, not, into Section 171(3) and then a little 3 of that Act. So it's a minor amendment. That kind of explains to me why you might not have bothered incorporating it as a first priority, because it's pretty minor. but we need to see if it's actually there. So we go back to the Evidence Act, and I've looked in section 171, 3A, little 3, and I can see that it's actually there, which tells me that there is a little glitch in the common law, and that probably that ought to have said incorporated amendment, not unincorporated amendment. Now, I've done this example lots of times, and I've never come across that before. So I thought I'd take you through it just to see the process of how you check what you need to do. So I would be emailing the Register of Legislation, and I'd be saying, I think there's a glitch here, and I'm sure they will fix it as soon as they can. But if you can't explain to a client what has happened there, that they can't rely on the information. So you need to be able to say that amendment actually has actually been incorporated and point to it and take them through the process of getting there. Anyway, so I've just done that. Now, I mentioned I was going to talk about the View Series link. Now, you could get to it from the search results, you can get to it from the browse view, and you can get to it also from the home page of the Act. If you click on View Series, you get all sorts of goodies. So I've chosen the last one first because the other thing I would do is because I'm a little bit suspicious about the currency of this Act now, I wanted to see if there were any upcoming bills. And so part of the View Series information has bills that are going to affect the Act. Now they just put them there. They don't take them away once they've been passed. So you can just sort of see all the bills that have amended this Act in the last few years. The last one there is actually about bills that we just looked at, the amendment there. So there's nothing further here. If I was in a law firm and we need to be absolutely sure, I would also check the Parliament site and see if there were any bills that weren't listed here as well. I would take that extra step. But it's quite handy just to be able to have it there. Now the next thing that I want to show you on the View Series tab is the compilations. Now this is actually the historical versions of the Evidence Act. So in my environment, which is the court, we all the time have to find out the legislation as it was at a particular point in time. Because if just say someone committed a crime in 2009, you need the version of the Crimes Act at the date of the offence. You can't have them being tried under the current legislation because it might have changed. So we're always going back to earlier versions of legislation. And I've just found that court staff and most other people, they don't think that View Series is a very intuitive way to find historical versions. So, and then you get to compilations, it doesn't even say their historical version. So there's all this very peculiar terminology just for this site. But in compilations, you get, the first one is actually the latest version of the current one. I see how it says no records to display there. I think that's because of their glitch. So hopefully once they fix it up, it will have that trade amendment that we just looked at before. You can see here that for each of these historical versions, they have the date it was registered, its particular register ID, the date it started and the date that it ended, and the last amendment clip. There's a lot of information there. As you go further back, though, through the consolidations, the compilations, there's not much information. So I went to the end of the list, and it was much, much sparser. So the earlier ones, they were all loaded on the same day, and it doesn't have a start and an end date. So you need to be able to figure out what the actual version date is. And the way that you do that is to look at the last amendment, look at when it commenced, and then look at the date of the next amendment, see when it commenced, and the time in between is the time that that version was in force. So there's quite a few steps to go there, but I have to say it's so much better than when you had to do it all with paper copies and pasting on amendments. So I still feel very lucky that we have that consolidated versions there like that. The next tab here is Principle and Amendments, and this is just nice links to all the amendments to this Act. So another way to actually look at the text of the amending Act is just to come to this tab and find it. It's much, much easier than having to go through the as made and find it by year and number or anything like that. They're all just listed here for you. So that's pretty nice. And the last thing I want to show you here is the Enables tab. It's another not particularly intuitive name, but what it means is the delegated legislation has been under this Act. And the term comes from the fact that sometimes we call the Act the Enabling Act. There's just a few things there that if you hadn't heard about them, the terminology could be really confusing. And quite often your clients won't understand what's hidden behind those tabs. And there's some really, really joyous and juicy bits of information hiding there, so it's really good to know about them. Now, the next thing I wanted to do was to look at Section 98 and look at the history of Section 98. So if you're back on that home page for the Act, there's a couple of different ways that you can get to that section. You could just do a control S and that would take you to the body of the Act there. I like to browse, so I like to either click this text button here or the expand all. The text button just gives you the Act broken down to its chapters and parts, and the expand all feature gives you a section by section listing. Now that is so helpful because if you know, how would you know which section, which part of the Act Section 98 is in? I wouldn't know off the top of my head, and I don't know enough about the structure of the Act to be able to tell just from the headings either. So if I click on that, I can just go straight to Section 98. It's very, very easy. But if it's a really enormous Act, and there are some Acts which are 3 volumes in print, and I just want to get to the endnotes quickly, I will use that text feature so that I can just quickly scroll down past the major chapter headings and get straight to the notes. There's just a couple of different options there. Now, I wanted to get to Section 98, so I did the expand all, and I just clicked on Section 98, and it brought it up there, and it's a coincidence rule. Now, one other thing to note is that if you try to print from this screen, it just doesn't work. It comes out in a big garbled mess. So what you need to do, if you have to print the section, is to use the download option, get the PDF, and just print the relevant pages. Or what we do at my work is we have a print to PDF option, so we just print the particular pages that we want to PDF and then email it off to people. And that works really well. So this one is about the coincidence rule. Now, to find out the history of the Act, I think Jill would have talked last week about the endnotes in legislation, the historical notes. And this really is the key to finding out about what happened to a particular section. So we'll mostly be looking at the legislation history and the amendment history, and we'll have a look at those. Right. Now this is the part of the amendment history endnote which relates to Section 98. So it says here, Section 98, RS number 135, 2008. And if that's the first thing you'd see and you hadn't had any legislation training at all, you might think, what is all that about? Now, helpfully, in one of the earlier endnotes, there's an abbreviation key. And so RS means repealed or substitute. So what it means is they took out the old Section 98 and put in a brand new version. And that was done by Act number 135 of 2008. Now they're just using your number because it's the most efficient and short way to cite a particular Act, as I'm sure Jill would have talked about last week. If you want to find out what the title of that Act was, then you use that other endnote that I talked about, which is the legislation history. And what it covers is the principal Act itself, and then all of the amendments to that Act, just listed in chronological order. So we're here in the Evidence Act, so we've got the Evidence Act 995. It was Act number 2 of 995. It was presented to 23rd of February 995, and it's got commencement details.
I'm just checking. I think we've lost Larissa. Oh, I have, yes, audio has stopped. It's me as well. Okay, everyone can hear me okay. So Larissa, can you hear us? Oh, no, she's dropped out, which is often what happens when the internet connection fails. So just bear with us, and hopefully she will be back with us very, very soon. While she's gone, which is very sad, obviously we're covering an awful lot of quite complex information here, for depending on where you're at in understanding legal research. One of my recommendations would be we will have the recording, and I would recommend that you then sort of work through the recording, doing stop, play, so that you've got the recording happening in one screen, and then you work through the activities that Larissa is taking you through as well, so that you can model it. In an ideal world, if we're in a face-to-face environment, that's exactly the way we would run the workshop. So that it would be 2 steps, and then so you do this, and so work through it all. And so we do understand in the online environment it's very hard to do that. So that's one way that you could actually be quite productive with material that Larissa is talking through. But please, we do need to know if you're not understanding things, the fact that we're not hearing from you or putting anything in the chat box. We're hoping that you do. Otherwise, if you're making some notes, then we can sort of reflect on that. Now, I'll just go off talk and check whether I can reach Larissa and find out where she is. I know she's joining us again, so just count to 10 and she'll be back. Larissa, are you there? No, she's joined the room, I can see. Yeah, let me move you. Yeah, okay. Let me move you up to become a moderator again. Okay, yep, so you're up there again with us in the top room.
Okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah, can you hear me or not?
You're very faint at the moment, so can you bring your microphone a little bit closer or something like that?
Yeah, hang on.
That's better, yeah, that's a lot clearer. So, obviously it's just a sort of a break in the connection. Yes, we can hear you very clearly. That's
yeah, it just kicks me out.
Yeah, yeah. When the connection isn't strong enough, it does kick you out. So it's not your fault. But what I was just saying to everybody was that
yeah, well, I've got a cable and everything.
Don't know. But anyway, what I was saying is that they can, the participants can repurpose the work that you're going through to run it themselves as their own little workshop, so that they can have the Federal Register of Legislation open and they go step by step through from the recording that we'll have as well. So yeah, okay, let me hand back to you. You feel comfortable, okay?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't kick me out again. There we go. Okay, so we're up to
okay, back to you and catch your breath and away you go.
We're up to signing out. Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yeah, it went flaky for a moment. So yeah, I'll shut up. Yeah, keep talking and we'll see how we go. I'm seeing a symbol that does show that it's not a very strong signal, which is very strange, considering you are on a cable connection.
Jill, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. So, yep. Can you hear us?
Now?
Yes,
okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. It's
great.
I can hear you.
Okay, all right. Well, fingers crossed. Let's hope that it does continue okay.
Okay, hope so. So, I was just explaining about this legislation history endnote and how it contains the chronological list of all the amendments to the Act. We were looking for Act number 135 of 2008, and that is the Evidence Amendment Act 2008. The reason you need to know the title is because if you're going to investigate the history of the Act, and you're going to go look for the bill, the second reading speech, explanatory memorandum, you can't do that with 135 of 2008. You really do need the title. So now we've found out that, we can go to the next step. We look for second reading and EM, that kind of thing. Even though the bills and EMs are on the Federal Register of Legislation website, I just wouldn't recommend using it at all. This site only includes the bill as introduced and the EM that accompanies that version of the bill. So if there's any amendments to the bill, you won't find them on here. If they issue a supplementary EM or a correction or a revision, it just won't be here. Now, there was a law librarians meeting earlier this year, and some people from the Federal Register came and gave a presentation. And they said they're actually considering taking the bills and EMs off the site because they know that it's not enough information. And they said Parliament does it better. So we're going to go to Parliament. Now, this is the Parliament website, and there's two main ways that you can get to bills from this site. And I should just say, with finding effective meeting speeches and explanatory memoranda, so often the best way to find them is to find the bill. And most websites, for at least more recent things, group together all the intrinsic material with the bill. So that's why it's just easier to do like a one-stop shop, that kind of thing. Now, the big bills option on the home page is pretty appealing, and that's where people mostly are going to start going, particularly your clients, because they'll go there and they'll just go bills, that's what I want, and off you go. The other option is up here is Parlinfo, so I'll go through both of them. If you just click on bills, you get a really friendly looking Google-like search box. And you think, this is great, this is easy, I love it. And you type in the name of the bill, and quite often you get nothing. And the reason for that is hidden beneath this more option is the fact that the site defaults to the current Parliament. So it defaults to Parliament number 45 with the date range and to current bills. Now this is because the site's obviously designed for members of Parliament and they are most interested in current bills. So it's absolutely logical that that's what they do, and in fact it probably should, because that's their client base that it's for. But quite often when I'm searching it, I don't want the current ones, I want a later one, because I'm going back to investigate the history of an older bill because I'm looking at legislation in the past. So you can change this drop-down list to all, and you can change it to previous bills, you can do all those things. The other option is to use Parlinfo search, and there was a link to that on the top right-hand corner of the home screen. I like this. I mean, I'm one of those librarians who likes to know all the options. I like to know what it is I'm searching. I want to know all just everything I can about the database before I search. Now, if there's a basic search option, which is not that different to the bills basic search, so I like to come to the advanced search screen. Now, there's a little search off at the top, and then there's all these collections that you can search. And one of the reasons it's good to see it is to see all the things that you can actually search that you might not have known that you could. So you've got the votes and proceedings, you've got the Hansard, you've got the journals for the Senate and the Senate Hansard, you've got all the procedural documents, so the practice procedure books, the standing orders, that kind of thing, you've got all the committee hearings, and you've also got bills and legislation. And over on the right, you've also got incredibly powerful searching options here. These drop-down lists have got about 20 options in them, and you can limit it to speaker, or you can limit it to the text or the date, or all sorts of things in there. And you can also do a date range search down there. So there's just lots and lots of options. So what I'm looking for here, I've just put in Evidence Amendment Bill 2008 and ticked bills and legislation. Now when it comes to the bill title, the best punt is just, the Amending Act title and just change it to bill and to the year that it was passed. If that doesn't work, I'd change it to a year earlier. It's 2007, it's conceivable that it was introduced 1 year and then can go to Parliament till the next, sometimes 2 years earlier. If that doesn't work, you've got to do a bit of digging. Sometimes the name of the legislation has changed over time, and so it may not be exactly what you thought, and you just have to do a bit of digging. Just pretend I've clicked search there. Now, in this results list, the result that you want is the one that says Bill Homepage, because that's the page that Parliament puts together for the bill, and it brings everything together for you. You can also just see, just as a by-the-by, that there's all these little facets down the side. So if you had done a big full text search or something else, you could filter it by different categories of information, by date, by Parliament, by House, all these different options. So that's just handy to know about as well. You don't get those kind of filtering options if you do just that basic search from the homepage. Now this is the bill homepage for the Evidence Amendment Bill. It tells you that it was a government bill, that it originated in the House of Representatives, that it was actually passed, became an act. It tells you which portfolio it's in, gives you a summary of the bill, gives you all the dates of things that happened to the bill all the way through Parliament. It's got the text of the bill, and then for our purposes here, it's got the EM and the second reading speech. So this one has got an EM and a correction to the EM. Now I did go back to the other website, the Federal Register, and just check, and the correction is not there. So if you had just used that site, you wouldn't know about the correction. And I don't know how major a correction it is, but sometimes there's quite significant amendments that have been put through Parliament. There's additional EMs that go with them, and you just wouldn't find them. So you need to come somewhere like this. Now the other thing that's a little bit weird about the Parliament site is if you come through Parlinfo, the bill homepage looks like this, but if you come to the other way, it looks like that. So it's just the same information, but it looks much prettier this way. So it's just good to know about the options, and if you're sending it to a client, maybe send them this one. It's entirely up to you. This one sort of set out a bit nice, you know, a bit more nicely, sort of snappier. Okay, now I'm just pretending that I've clicked on the EM because I'm wanting to find out. So the history of Section 98. Why was it introduced in this new form? You know, what led to this reform? What happened? And so the best way to go is to the EM. So the way EMs are structured is there's usually what's called a general outline at the start, and it's sort of a big picture overview of the bill, and then later on there are notes on clauses which go through clause by clause every single bit of the bill. So I can see from this EM that there was a Law Reform Commission report, and that's what has led to this amendment being made. It was a pretty big Law Reform Commission report because it was the Australian Commission, the New South Wales one, and the Victorian one in a joint report. So I'd be going and looking for that report. And I can also see down here that the Standing Committee of Attorneys General had a working group, and they worked on it as well. So I'd also be going off and hunting for those documents. There's also, as part of that general outline, just a really big picture overview of the major reforms. So there's just a little paragraph here about coincidence evidence. Now that kind of thing is really helpful when you're a law librarian and you're not a lawyer and you're trying to get your head around what it is that you're actually reading about. That's just a plain English version of the thrust of what this amendment is about. Now these EMs are made to members of Parliament. As you know from the recent election, you can have people coming from all walks of life, and they need to be informed of what they're voting on. And so these documents help them to understand what the effect of the legislation is that they're voting on. I'm going to go a bit further down to the notes on clauses. There's just a fair bit more detail about, in slightly more technical language, about the effect of this amendment. So it's item 43 of the bill, which amends Section 98 of the Evidence Act, and it tells you all the things there. Now, I would also go and have a look at the second reading speech as well. I did that for this bill, and it was pretty short and minor. And what I found is that when there's a really enormous amendment, like a really big reform, and there's all these reports that have been done on it, the second reading speech is generally a little bit shorter and just sort of big picture stuff, because all of that detail work has been done in those reports. The good thing about the second reading speech is that it will lead you to those reports very quickly, but there's not going to be a lot of detail contained in it. If it's a smaller amending act, sometimes there's quite a bit of detail, just because there's no other information about it and they want to get through why this legislation is important. So you might get more detail about a smaller act, which sort of sounds a bit counterintuitive. That's just what I've found over the years. So what we've done there is we've looked at the Evidence Act in its current form. We've checked that it really is up to date. We looked at Section 98, and we've looked at the history of it, and we've found extrinsic materials relating to it. So that's sort of what I want to show you with the government websites. Now what I want to go to is the commercial and non-government websites and just show you some of the features that, you know, why do people pay money to get legislation when it's available for free on an authorised website? There must be reasons, so we'll have a look at some of those now. Now, the first one I want to show you is Law Now, which is on LexisNexis. Now, it's a complete legislation database, so it's got legislation for all jurisdictions, and one of the best things about it is that it's integrated into the LexisNexis platform. So you get, you know, links from Portals of Australia into Law Now, okay, you know, all sorts of things link into it, so it's an integrated part. It's got this lovely browsable homepage for each jurisdiction, and it tells you all sorts of things about, you know, it's up to date at this date, and which gazette it's up to date, all that kind of stuff, so you know that it's current. But it also has these really useful browsable lists, and I just want to show you about a few of them that I particularly like. So the current acts by subject. This is just major subject headings and key acts underneath them, so that could be a quick way to identify major pieces of legislation in addition to your other commentary searching and other subject indexes. It's just a good thing. The keywords and titles. This is a situation I was talking about before where you're not quite sure of the exact title of the act, you just know a keyword. So you're thinking Competition and Consumer Act or Australian Competition and Consumer Act, what is the title? And this will help you get there. And it also can be a little bit of a de facto subject index because you'll get all the acts with this major keyword in the title as well. And this last list that I want to show you is defined terms. And that just picks out every single term that's been defined in all Commonwealth Acts. And that's just so handy sometimes. Sometimes you just need to find, if the act is defined legislation, it might be defined in a few different acts. And that can be quite hard to find otherwise because it's hard to search full text for a definition. Whereas this one, it just plucks it out for you. So it just does a lot of the work for you. And then those lists are repeated for the subordinate legislation as well. And there's some fantastic bills lists too. But far and away, my absolute, hang on, I just want to say a bit about when you get to the Evidence Act. So just imagine I've browsed and I'm here at the Evidence Act. It's got a lot of the same things as federal registered legislation, but with much more intuitive titles. So it has the historical versions rather than the word view, series and compilation. It's got some legislation rather than the heading enables, that kind of thing. So it just makes it easier for you to get to that information without having to understand strange terms and click on buttons that aren't very intuitive. But my favourite feature of this is this express search icon here, which is like a little fast forward button. So if you get to your particular section, you click on the little fast forward button, and it runs this amazing proximity search across all of LexisNexis and brings back all the hits. So in commentary, in cases, all over the place. And it's just a proximity search. It's pretty simple, but particularly for clients, it's just like magic. You just click this button and it does the work for you. So instead of having to construct the search yourself, you just click that button and off it goes. And then you can see all the sources where this section 98 is mentioned. And you can separate it out by cases, legislation, commentary, forms of precedence, journals, or you can narrow by source here. So if I was looking at section 98 of the Evidence Act, one of the first things I'd look at would be cross-on evidence here, and I'd look at Horses of Australia as well, maybe some of the procedural titles. And I would also have a look at case base and see that. So one of the good things about this is if you're looking for cases on a particular section, normally you'd go to case base and you type it all in. But if you do this search, it does that particular search for you, plus all the commentary as well. And you can just filter into the results that you want. That's just the handiest thing. Everyone loves it. And I should tell you that there's a new version of LexisNexis coming out imminently. I think we might even have it already. It's called Lexis Advanced, and it's a new sort of more Google-like platform, as they all tend to be when they relaunch. And on that platform, they'll have a similar functionality, but instead of it being called the Express Search icon, it'll be called the Legislation Citator. And instead of it running a proximity search and just getting all the hits, they've actually marked up the text of all of the content, and it finds genuine references to this section of the Act, whereas the proximity search will occasionally turn up a false hit, but the new one won't. So it's a really exciting development, and it will just be fantastic. It saves so much time. So that's one of the reasons that we all like law now. Now, the major competitor to Westlaw, to LexisNexis, is Westlaw. And they don't have a legislation database that covers all legislation in all jurisdictions. So often people don't think of Westlaw as a legislation platform. But I wanted to show you that it can be really, really good for major pieces of legislation. So what they've done is they've constructed their searches in a way so that you can find legislation that's within a loose leaf service or a commentary, depending on what you call them. In the court, they're all loose leaf because there's still a lot of print services there. So you just type in the name of the Act in the legislation title field, you type in the section into the provision field, and you click search, and away you go. And you get a little results list, and it tells you where this section can be found. It can be found in uniform evidence law, or the federal court practice, or federal offences. Now, I'm going to go for uniform evidence law because it's a specialised evidence service, but I would also look at the other two if I were doing this research in real life. And so when you get to, when you click on that hit, it'll take you to the loose leaf service. It will show you the text for the section first. And then if you scroll down, there's often, not always, but often, some commentary. And so you just get this amazingly targeted commentary just about that section. And you can see it's very, very detailed. Here, EA over there just means evidence access, so I don't have the paragraphs. But there's so much information there. It will just help you to understand the operations section, take you to leading cases, all that kind of thing very, very quickly. There's also some other tabs there. So the cited documents. It just pulls together all the references that were in the commentary from that first tab. So it's just quick links to the major cases and legislation, commentary, all that kind of thing. And then related documents. Oh, see, I want to click on the tab. Related documents takes you to other bits of Westlaw AU that are related to it. But what's so good about it is that it gives you this whole breadcrumb trail, so you can see the context of the potential hit, and you can judge whether or not it's relevant. And so it just saves you doing the keyword searches that you can have to plow through too many results, and you get quite targeted results this way. So it's worth bearing in mind if it's a really like a key piece of legislation, evidence or crimes or something like that. LawLex. Now LawLex is an interesting site because there's a free component and a subscription component. And the way that it works is it's like sort of an interface to all the government websites. So if you're in one of those firms that has offices in every state in Australia, and it can be quite frustrating to have to remember all the different ways of searching all the different legislation sites around the country. And LawLex just provides an interface to all of them. So you can just run your search here, and you will get the result in the West Australian legislation site, in the Northern Territory legislation site, and the South Australian one. So it's kind of a really, really easy, quick search. And that part is free. There's also an advanced search that's free and a browse. So we'll look at the advanced search in a minute. The browse is also a subject-heavy list. So as far as I can tell, it's pretty much the only free source of like a subject classification of legislation. So if you're out there, and when you're working in a law library, they have different levels of resourcing. Some people, they don't have Salisbury's, and I can't imagine not having Salisbury's to do really fundamental basic research. People just don't have it. And how are they going to find out legislation on a particular topic? This is one way that you can go about it, is to use the subject index in here. I'm just going to show you the advanced search though. So this is a free search, so you've got a lot of precision available to you for free. So you just put in the keywords from the title of the Act. The one thing that is weird here is you can't put the year in the title. I don't understand this, and I've complained to them many times because the year is in fact part of the title, but in this search, you can't put it there. So you would have to put Evidence Act and then put the year down here. But you can limit it to one or more jurisdictions and to particular types of acts, principal acts, amending acts, and so on. You can take out repealed or include repealed legislation. You can limit the search to particular subject categories, and you can sort it in different ways. So that's pretty amazing for a free search. I think you've got to really hand it to them for giving that to everyone for free. Now, once you get to your act on LawLex, this is where you get to divide between the free and the subscription. So everything on the left-hand side is free, and everything on the right-hand side is the subscription resource with a little lock on it. So what it does is it gives you a link to the actual bit of legislation on the government website. So you click on that to get to the Evidence Act on the Federal Register. And then it has these related links. So it takes you to historical versions, it takes you to the second reading speech. For later acts, it will also take you to the explanatory memorandum as well. So all of that work is done for you across all of Australia. So I can't tell you how much time this saves if you have to research across different jurisdictions. And if you do your own jurisdiction, you might know how to do it backwards, but different ones can be fiddly to find out. So this just provides that for you for free. And the index categories are there for free as well. Now the sort of things that are in the subscription part is the commencement information. Now we can do that ourselves, but they just make it convenient. It's got regulations under the Act, history of amendments, all that sort of thing we can actually find ourselves for free, but they just make it easier for you on there. It's got alerts, which are only a subscription service. Some are acts have also got Gazette notices, which is a really valuable feature. These other two, Lex Connect and Code Connect, this is part of another part of their business. They are the supplier of Australian standards, and they have codes of practice as well. So if there had been an Australian standard reference in this Act, there'd be a link to it here, and you could purchase it from there, or if you had a subscription, you could download it. So it's sort of a little bit like a sales model as well, so they're sort of leading you into their other products. But it's pretty great, and a lot of people just love it for the fact that it makes it simple to do searches across different jurisdictions. The only thing I wouldn't use it for is I don't trust its full text legislation search, because it's trying to get into the guts of Federal Register legislation and New South Wales legislation and Western Australian. The search operators in those sites are all different, and I just don't trust its results properly. So I would use something else to do a full text search, but just to quickly locate the Act and the extension materials, easy and wonderful. Now, Timebase is another commercial service. They've got two products. One is Law One, which is legislation from every jurisdiction in Australia. They've got the deepest archives of all the different materials for all the states. And they've got this lovely slogan, "We love legislation," and they genuinely do. They're always trying to make their products better. They're trying to deepen their archives. They're working with law libraries to get more materials to digitise. They're very, very passionate about it. And because they're one of the key legislation is their only kind of business, whereas with law now it's part of legislation with other things that's part of something else. Their whole focus is legislation. They've recently launched a new platform. They put a lot of work into that. And you really can do a really powerful search across all the jurisdictions, and all the text is included in the database, so you're doing a proper search as compared to LawLex, which is that umbrella kind of product trying to get into other websites. So it's really great for cross-jurisdictional research and exchanging materials. It has that same approach as the other ones I've shown you, where you find the bill and then you find all the material related to it in one place. It's just fantastic. And the other product they have is point-in-time legislation. Now, I haven't been this for a long time, but a lot of firms tell me they swear by it. It only exists for key subject areas like corporations, tax, migration. But the way that it works is you just type in a date and it just brings up legislation exactly at that date for you. And it saves all the headaches of trying to track sections and get particular versions. And it's just the be-all end-all. If you've got a practice area in that subject area, you're probably going to have that in a certain environment. We just don't have it in the courts. And I also want to talk about Ostly, because Ostly is a marvellous, marvellous treasure of information, and we couldn't do without it. But I think every law librarian will tell you that they wouldn't rely on it for current legislation. There's been a few incidents where it just wasn't up to date and people were caught out, and it really mattered. So I just wanted to point out the update status legislation. If you click on that, it takes you through, and because they're aware of this problem, they're trying to be transparent about the dates of the coverage of their products. And if you look here, I think that little red box needs to be, but the Commonwealth consolidated acts are only updated weekly. Now, a week is a very long time in law, and you could be missing a really critical amendment. So that's why you just can't rely on it. You can use it to search, you can use it for all these things, and get in the ballpark and then verify it on the Federal Register if you like. People do that, but you just can't use this as the endpoint. It's a little bit like using Wikipedia, using references and getting to the authorized source. You can use it as a tool, but it can't be the end result. But there are some things that you can use before, and there's things that are really great about it as well. So their archive of Commonwealth ENs goes back further than anybody else's. And ENs, they don't change. So once you scan the text of it, it doesn't matter. There's not going to be an evolving version of it. There might be a supplementary one, which will also be there, but it's not the same thing as an up-to-date act that, and then it hasn't commenced yet, or it's not included yet. Now, they've worked with law librarians around the country to deepen their archive, and they're always adding more. So lots of libraries have donated their print collections to offer to digitise. You can see there's some years that they don't have them, that's fine. But no one else goes back very far. Most people go back to early 90s at best, and this has got some through the 80s as well. Now, I've written a little guide to common legislation, which is also on the Blackboard site, and it's got some extra sources of Commonwealth ENs. There's the ATO site, it's got tax years back to 1986, and the Takeover Panel Corporations Law ones back a long way as well. But this is the single best archive of ENs. And the other thing that's really excellent about it is that you can search the full text of the particular act, which is very tricky to do on the Federal Register of Legislation. So if you don't have access to a commercial database, this can be a way of doing a full text search, which you then verify the results in the Federal Register. And the other thing is good is this Note Up button here. And that is, I think, was the inspiration for LexisNexis's Express Search. So it functions exactly the same way. You click on it, and it just runs a search across all of Ostly to find references to that section of the Act. I like to sort it by database, so I can then see, if it's cited, the section is cited in the High Court, it's been cited in the Federal Court, and the Full Court, that kind of thing. You can also sort by relevance or by date. There's lots of really good options there. The other thing that's really good about NoteUp is that because it's searching on Ostly, it will find references in lower court decisions. Now, for a lot of people, lower court decisions don't matter because they have no precedential value. But if you're before one of the lower courts, it makes a huge difference. The District Court in South Wales is one of a powerhouse court. They get through so many matters, and lots of barristers are appearing in those courts. Judges that I work for obviously are in charge of those courts, and decisions from those courts are relevant for them. And they're not going to turn up in case basis first point because they're not precedential. That doesn't mean that they're not useful for particular purposes. So it can really be helpful for that kind of thing as well. And it'll also find it in tribunal decisions, that kind of thing. And if sometimes even just be yourself, people go to tribunals to sort out their own matters. It's very hard to find information about what's going to happen to you in a tribunal, but you can find the decisions through Ostly. So it's a really, really valuable source of information. Anyway, so that's pretty much what I wanted to show you. I just wanted to cover the government sites and the commercial sites and why you might use the different sites, because they've all got their own special value-added features that make them a good choice for a particular kind of research. Anyway, I'm happy to answer questions or anything like that.
Yeah, wow. Thank you, Larissa. You've covered an enormous amount of territory going through that. Just one act, all the different dimensions and across the different platforms and the different research activities, all the tips and tricks. While you were gone in the little interlude, as I said, I really would encourage everybody to replay the recording at your own pace and have the databases that you have access to open so that you can go step by step through the different areas that Larissa has introduced you to. It's been really rich, I think, to have her commentary about how this all applies in real life as well. Chloe has got a comment there, which I'll read for the recording as well. The overview of the commercial sites and the quick help tips that you didn't learn in law school. So that's really helpful to know. We had a pre-conversation about some of lawyers not necessarily understanding all of the perspectives of what the databases can offer as well. So that's really good. As you talk through Austerley and some of those issues, I was actually with Attorney Generals out in the Pacific about 18 months ago, and the availability of what we have in Australia is quite amazing. A lot of the Pacific Islands still have all their legislation under copyright, so you can't have free access to even the laws that govern all of the people. So it's really quite interesting how Austerley through PACLI is trying to work with the authorities across the Pacific Islands to say, no, it's just people's information. It's really very important. So the fact that we do have so many resources available to us is an added bonus, even though it adds complexity. But anyway, any other questions? Any queries that you'd like clarified? There's lots for you to absorb there. You're certainly not going to dream about it overnight and know it all. So please take the recording afterwards and work through progressively what is of interest to you to do that. Okay, so let's just take a quick break. We'll thank Larissa very, very much. She doesn't need to stay with us. It's also New South Wales time, so she's an hour ahead as well. So, Larissa, thank you very, very much indeed. I know on the website we've got your contact details. On the website we've got the contact details. So, if you do have queries as you go through, working through it, then let's do that. There's a little bit of interference somewhere with the sound at the moment, but so okay. So it's. Let's come back at 10 past, okay? It's about 3 minutes past 7 Brisbane time at the moment.